that, let's talk about the main event, the main speech, and that is Donald Trump's first address to the Muslim world. He came, he spoke, but did he conquer?
Well, certainly in terms of the attendees in the summit, I think there's probably a majority that supports him and charm him, and some of them will probably be schmoozing him all along. I think Donald Trump feels more at home at this Islamic summit than he does in the American Congress, or even in Washington for that matter. Clearly this has been a bit of a PR success for him, and I think the idea that he continued to hammer that he's not coming there to preach and he doesn't want to teach Muslims how to live their life or worship their religion. So instead of preaching, what he did through most of his speech, it was more of a call for action. It was a more of a call for action. It wasn't about religion. It wasn't about Islam. What was a bit surprising, miraculous, if you will, he went on from a year ago saying Islam hates us to now saying Islam is one of the world's greatest religions. I think that turnaround, of course, is going to be looked at quite positively in this conference. But be that as it may, I think his call for action against terrorism was in a way looking in details about the various ways America wants to work with Arab leaders in order to combat terrorism. But Foley, there was absolutely no attempt by the American president at explaining, not justifying, explaining then where does terrorism come from or came from in the last few decades if Islam is not the cause. Because he made it clear that he no longer believes that Islam is the cause or Islam is associated with terrorism. Well, if not, then why are there so many terrorists and terrorist groups springing up in various places of the Muslim world? Here, I think the American president, unlike his predecessor, President Obama, failed to address the root causes of why the region is living the misery, the conflict, the war, the terror, the suffering that it's living, and certainly did not address any of the American role in any of that. So instead what he did is he praised Saudi Arabia like we've never heard before, but he condemned Iran like we've heard before, but condemned Iran in a way where I think in so many ways paves the way for a renewed American policy along the traditional lines of hostility towards Iran.
So in your view then, we didn't hear anything new. But Marwan, let's just listen once again to what President Trump said about lecturing Arab leaders. And this is something that came up time and time again in his speech. He said, we're not here to impose our way of life. We're not here to lecture you. Let's listen to that soundbite now.
We are not here to lecture. We are not here to tell other people how to live, what to do, who to be, or how to worship. Instead, we are here to offer partnership.
So he said, we're not here to lecture you, Marwan, but he said Arab countries bear greater responsibility for their security. He said nations in the Middle East cannot wait for American power to crush the enemy of terrorism for them. That's not lecturing?
Well, you know, in so many ways, it's not. I mean, in the sense that this has been a long Trump cliche or symbol, if you will, that America is not going to do other people's bidding for them. It can help them, but it's not going to do it for them. And I think since he entered the political fray, I think he was very clear that he's not going to be the leader of the world, and he's not going to go on the ground and fight other people's wars for them. I think in so many ways, this is also in line with other conservative American leaders who did not think America needs to be the world's policeman. And now, having said that, on the other hand, look, I mean, he boasted of the beautiful American military equipment. He boasted of the $110 billion arms deal, something that's equivalent to half a century of U.S. trade in arms with Saudi Arabia. So while America might not be preaching to other people how to live, but certainly America is helping, if you will, arm different nations in the region in the midst of conflict and war in the region, whether that will lead to arms race or not, whether that will lead to further instability or not, especially in light of the new renewed hostility towards Iran. Of course, these are questions that have to do with the reality check once Donald Trump leaves the Middle East. And one last note on the question of preaching. Look, the question has never been whether you preach to people and you force them to live like you do through the battlefield of your tanks and war like W. Bush tried to do after 9/11, or simply being cynical and pragmatic about letting genocide and war and terror and so on and so forth engulf other societies. There should be a happy medium where civilizations, nations share experiences and do share values. But what we've heard from President Obama is going to be shared interest and common security. Nothing about sharing civilizational values. And that's probably something that his hosts in Saudi Arabia and other Muslim countries would welcome. But that's not necessarily something that will work out in the long term.
Marwan, I want to bring in our guest here in the studio.